How long were you living out there?
In LA?
Yeah.
Well, I'm still here. I'm still in Hollywood right now. So
Oh yeah. How
I
long have you
have,
been out there?
yeah, I guess off and on I've moved a little bit, but since like 2010.
Yeah, that's significant. So it's
Yeah,
pretty
and
crazy.
every time
Yeah.
every time I move away, I'm so depressed about it. I mean, I love being here, but the writing's on the wall. I mean, what more can I do? It's only going to deteriorate from here. And they're talking about more rounds of lockdowns, and they reinstated the mask mandates, and none of that was a surprise to me. The shutdowns woke me up, like just lifted the veil over from my eyes, and it's definitely been an opportunity to recalibrate and reconsider everything that I ever believed. But
Yeah, I've heard
gotta do it at some point.
You gotta do it. You gotta it's like you jump in the cold water. You're like, oh shit, it's hard. At some point, everyone's got their time where they can't avoid it. And those are the lucky ones. And I've heard you say on past podcasts, like you're sort of, when people ask you about your red pill moment, if it was one moment, and you'll say like it sort of happened in bits, and then also kind of all at once, like if you could point to a single moment, or like was it the first round of lockdowns for you that woke you up,
Yes,
or is it more like expanding your circle and meeting different people?
I would say, it's interesting because you can always look back and say those were some moments that I ignored that should have woke me up. But things in context and hindsight are obviously it's easier to put it all the pieces together. So once the lockdowns came, I gave it the 2-3 weeks that they were asking for, and then I started listening to some alternative opinions about what was afoot, and I considered it, which I think intelligent people do. They consider ideas even if they don't believe in them. I mean, don't you want to form your own opinion based upon the facts at hand? And who's to say what the facts are? We're talking about opinions, right? So the shutdowns definitely woke me up, but it was, of course, it's stretching into 2 months. By the 1 month mark of shutdowns, it was over for me. I mean, I was just angry at Gavin Newsom, and so I liked this criticism of Gavin Newsom, and the threats began to recall him in about 2 months into the shutdown, because the levels of personal invasion and the infringements on personal rights were just excessive here and in New York.
So you were starting to question everything that was going on before the shots of Newsom out to dinner, maskless, before he was like caught out on the weekend or whatever it was.
Yeah, because there were a lot of historians, or at least historically educated people that were saying, well, when we've seen this in the past, these are what authoritarian takeovers look like. These are the ways that they set the table. These are the things they say. They often go with the whole greater good, these kinds of things. So as soon as the language started changing from the politicians, and facts weren't lining up, and truth was just being shrouded, as a fair person, that activated in me that maybe I wasn't on the team that was being forthright, and I can't do that. It was in conflict with my personal values. So I had to investigate what the truth was, and I just reevaluated absolutely everything once I started down that path. And because he insisted that my governor insisted that I sit at home, I had nothing to do except have all day and night to go investigate and dig into it. And that was to his detriment. If he hadn't interrupted my life, maybe I would never have uncovered the truth about the intent of these people. So
yeah, you give millions of people all the time and all of the internet, and some of us are going to end up down some rabbit holes. Like a big moment for me was, it was like the first flight that I had gone on since the lockdowns, and I was like, oh, I was thinking it was going to be every other row, every other seat. I thought every flight I was going to go on in all of last year and even this year was going to be like And I was like, oh, they're selling every seat on every flight I've been on. Like, that's laughable.
Well, they did that every other seat thing for a couple months. But of course, they were trying to keep with the concept, the appearance that they were reevaluating every few weeks and every month. And but as soon as they went to full capacity on the airlines, I mean, it was so obvious because, and when you have special interests that go and lobby with the leaders, of course, they're going to get special treatment, just like the teachers' unions and these other types of groups. And airlines definitely weren't going to suffer from this. They were unwilling.
You mentioned that you had stumbled on like alternative media and like alternative information sources. Like, what were some of those sources that, made you start to go, things are not as what they seem?
Well, I mean, I had already found the podcast world. So just natural, Joe Rogan is my podcast home base, as I call him. And then, of course, from there, all the delineating guests. And so I'd already built a world filled with thought leaders that were outside the mainstream. And that helped because it was an ushering in. It was a more natural transition because I had already established some credibility and trust with these other voices that were not CNN. But it happened almost immediately that I wanted to turn the TV off. I just looked sideways at my TV and felt like that's definitely a propaganda mechanism right there. So I'm going to cut it out of my life, which I did almost immediately. I was never really a big TV person, but going cold turkey, it's pretty easy with the whole integration of podcast life into my world anyway. So I found Tim Pool, one of my friends, had been working me for a while. He was like, he was trying to build up all these reasons, even before the shutdown, as to why he was voting for Trump. And I thought that was a crazy idea at the time. And but he would always make these intelligent arguments. And I think that's what contributed to being able to change my mind, was the fact that I never demonized people on the other side. There's this idea that, these people are that citizens that believe something different and vote differently than you are evil. But like I said, I'm from Kansas. I grew up with conservatives. I never believed people right of center were evil, to whereas a lot of leftists in Hollywood do. So it's going to be harder for them. I think that they will have the opportunity to get there if they want to, but some people are so committed to being right that they're just unwilling.
Oh, absolutely. And they don't spend a lot of time talking to people who they deem the enemy, and they exaggerate their position to be kind of cartoonish almost. I feel like people on the left, they're just, if you're not on the radical left with them, you must hate gays. You must
which is so
hate all poor people. It's like these sweeping generalizations.
Yeah, having no idea about the things that got us to the point that we're at, or who our friends are, or even how we identify in our attitudes, or the implementation of our beliefs in our own personal lives. Like, how could somebody that doesn't know you know any of those things? So identity politics just seemed pretty stupid to me, because there are all these exceptions. So it was I would say a natural open mind that allowed me to be flexible enough to leave behind old ideas.
Absolutely. And you coming from Kansas, so you're growing up around maybe more conservative minded folks, and then you get into modeling, which is, every time I talk to another comedian or somebody in the adult industry, like, it's a default very leftist industry. Everybody you work with, it seems like all your coworkers, everyone around you, is more kind of a default on the left. Did you experience, so even though you came to the world of modeling, okay, you're like, a lot of conservatives, a lot of people on the right, was it a big adjustment? Like in the modeling world, it's just, okay, did you feel like you had to hide your political opinions or anything like that?
Well, remember, this all happened during a shutdown. So one thing that had happened was there was a halt in production entirely. So there were some Hollywood productions that were allowed special circumstances that they could film in their closed sets. They had to overhaul everything. I mean, they were putting tape on the floors to where you could walk, and then people had to like Lysol the air around them, and absurd things. Just ridiculous things, because I had known enough people in film that I was watching it all unfold in the way that they were, you know, gathering in secret to, you know, do things like deliver, you know, cinema lenses and things. Like it was pretty silly to watch. But as far as the people that are non-union, I mean, what were any of us going to do? I mean, gig economy is tough enough anyway, but then add on top of it that people act like you're carrying the plague or that they're going to get shut down. And, you know, I understood it all in the beginning, but then I knew, and then they started doing things like, if you're coming to a casting, you have to have a COVID negative test, all these things that definitely just made me feel unwelcome, because I felt like I was participating in a fraud, you know, this hustle being executed upon the whole world. Who wants to do that? I mean, just to go around people to go to a casting, I mean, it just seems so such a waste of my energy and effort to invest any more into these people. So I didn't have to defend my attitudes and beliefs. I mean, everybody was locked down for the most part, except of course the people that, you know, chose not to. So but I took the stay-at-home orders seriously the first couple months, because what was I going to do? I mean, it was detrimental, but all of Hollywood stopped. And I was already a person that my work is really fun. So all the things that are entertainment based in my life are centered around my work, or at least I've designed my life that way. So there wasn't anything I was particularly compelled to go do, because everything centered around my production. So yeah. It's hard. It's still hard. It's still emotional to think about, because of how, and not that everything was perfect here, but it was so good. You know, the life that you were free to design in the city. I just unplugged from it naturally. Of course, there was an artificial push to unplug. But it felt so, the whole conversations around anything that I could possibly go do on set was filled with all this like irrationality and the things that people would say. None of it was landing with me. It all felt like an episode of, you know, of Black Mirror. Like I just, it felt Twilight Zone-y, and who wants to live in that life?
Yeah. And I feel like at this point, anybody who is still being like, hey, wait, aren't these our basic freedoms? We're being taught that our basic freedoms, to fight for them is to be considered a selfish individual, and to not care for the masses. It's really wild. It's like this.
Well, and it's so manipulative.
So fake to me. Yeah, it's very manipulative.
Yeah.